Okay, well, thank you all for coming to another exciting meeting of the Micro Giants. Today, we're going to dig a little bit deeper into the marketing process, marketing planning, and that whole genre. One of the reasons that I think that this is important is because with clients, I have found that they don't really do a great job in in marketing planning, and they have a hard time doing things that are consistent and following up. And so as a result, I over a period of time, I developed this approach based on a logical sequence of capturing the data and going around this sort of circle, which we ended up calling the marketing process cycle eventually, and looking at customers, doing some analysis on customers, doing a competitive analysis. Who are your competitors? What products are you competing, with those competitors? Some actual market research, and then doing targeting on those customers, which is, that's pretty standard. The interesting thing is that everybody thinks they know everything about customers, and they usually only know about 10%. They know kind of who their competitors are because they get feedback from a lot of different places, and maybe their sales reps. They see their advertising. They run into a competing, say, a customer who bought from a competition. I mean, they get some feedback, but it's not really the kind of competitive analysis that I'm talking about, or as deep as it needs to be. They hardly ever do market research. It's mostly sort of gut feel. Everybody does talk about targeting, but they just kind of do it based on, well, it's going to be, young people between this age and that age, et cetera, without a really hard target. And then, of course, hardly any of them do marketing positioning. We spend a lot of time talking about that. But so then the thing is that when you're done with that, it's time to do the campaign planning. And by campaign, what we really are talking about is a process of developing a specific set of content delivered to a specific target market that is using specific media, and it should be coordinated with your sales efforts. And then when it is all done, you've got feedback and then final assessment, and then guess what? You get to start all over again. And so what we tend to see is we start at the top of this cycle, and we go around the inside first, trying to do each one of these that we can and do it as fast as possible, especially when a client is in real need. And I've had people say, "Oh my gosh, sales have dropped. I don't know what to do. I've got to have some advertising." Now that's when Ed's guys used to come in and just clean up because they were able to sell advertising, at that level. And but I have to go through this pretty quick to understand not only who they are, what they're doing, and about their business, a little bit about their business, but especially their market, and see if they really understand that positioning at all. Sometimes we have to jump very quickly with a few facts into market positioning, and we go around it and pretty quickly get some campaign developed to take the pressure off of the pressure points, to go after the low-hanging fruit and the things that seem reasonably obvious based on that sort of limited look, and then we execute. And that's doing the content development, doing the advertising, promotion, PR, selecting the media. Sometimes there's an interface with sales, and then so you go on. So what happens is that then you go around this cycle, and then the next time you go around it again, you do it in a little bit more detail. And this plan goes on, and you keep literally going around and around and around. And so every time you go around it, you have better and better and better information, and your marketing gets better and better and better. So that's the reason we did that. But there are a couple of other reasons too. So, I mean, why would you really want to use this? The standard way of doing it is, let's do a marketing plan, kind of like a business plan. We'll just state what we're going to do, and we'll just throw the stuff out, put it on a linear piece of paper, and there you go. But I think the reason to do a cycle is because, well, first of all, it's just plain logical. I mean, what it does is it uses a set of data that builds one set on another set on another set, and it compares that data to each other, to the other components. In other words, customer data with competitor data, et cetera. The process finishes itself. In other words, you have to stay on track, you have to move forward, and then as you come back around, guess what? It starts again. And so you never end up with a document, and what typically happens is that some of the execution happens and some of it doesn't, and then the next marketing plan comes because the last one wasn't maintained, it wasn't executed, and there you are, just wondering what you should be doing again. I would say that happens in about 90 or 95% of all businesses up until 400 employees, 300 employees, somewhere in there. Hardly anybody does this, but it's particularly necessary for small business because they need this push forward. And that really is to assist the discipline in the company. Those who don't like to do marketing and they don't like sales, but they like, say, the administrative side or the production side, it kind of keeps them going, and at least they can, whoever's been assigned to do this can kind of keep on track. It helps keep, if you're big enough to have a marketing assistant, or someone who is a marketing person, it helps the owner, the president, keep them on track, because marketing people coming from creative disciplines are notoriously unorganized. And so they have to be organized. And what I've discovered is if you're not organized, your marketing was not going to respond properly. So Edgar, I see you nodding your head there.
Kind of hits home a little.
And then thirdly, it creates a real data-driven, actionable marketing plan. And so we've used this planning marketing cycle. Over the years we have changed it just a little bit and taken one or two of the outside elements on, but it breaks into a planning, a positioning section, an execution, and a measurement section. So that's really John sort of stylized this, did a better job on design, and simplified it. So that's what we have found, and literally I think that has been under use 20 years or more. So the practice, and you might have seen in this slide, the sort of the practice of using this to show how do we get to positioning. Well, you look at the customer stuff and it goes into the customer analysis. The customer analysis ends up driving targeting to a degree, and it also helps to understand competencies. When you look at competition, you're looking at a competitive analysis and the overall market. And then that helps drive the competitive value when you make, the value diamond. And so you take all of these elements, they drive this to the marketing positioning. So then you end up with the targeting and then the positioning, and then you're ready to execute. But when you are ready to execute, oops, this thing didn't work quite the way I'd planned it. Then this is really to show the market characteristics, which we don't want to forget about, even though it's no longer an individual item there. It's kind of part of the competition. So we do this competitive market analysis, and that's where we really take a look at the competition in one sphere, and you've seen this before, the customer profiles in another, and then the core competencies that are required in another. And this is really to illustrate that it's these three characteristics, along with market size, market share, and your competitive, to build your sort of competitive profile. It's these things that must interface, and you find that your strengths are sitting right here. This is where these are your customers. They're not your competition's customers. You may share customers with your competition, but you beat your competition in a certain area because you've got core competencies that don't overlap with your competition. So how do you organize this? And this is sort of key. And I've added this. This is because I realized that we really hadn't gone through it at this level. First, you have to build creative based on the positioning statement. Okay. However, the positioning statement comes out, you don't really start building creative until that's done. Because how do you know what font to use and whether to use sharp edges or rounded corners or colors? What do you do? Because there's a huge gap between a 90-year-old woman who you're trying to do a little bit of marketing to get them to come to your store and a young hip hop customer that you're trying to sell shoes to. You're not going to have the same imaging in any way, shape, or form. So, that's pretty logical. But it's amazing how many times people will jump into that without even knowing what their positioning is going to be. Now, you can't get the positioning right every time, but it's really wrong if you don't, go through that. Then you're able to really plan, okay, we've looked at the target, here's our target area audience, and we've got the positioning that we've looked at. Now we're really ready to do some of these things. Then you set up budgets. So, you need to plan. How much are you going to spend on doing the creative process? How much are you going to spend on your advertising, your social media, etc.? Now that can change, but at least you set up a basic idea as to where you're going to allocate this money as you go through the process. Then, and here's the important part, you have to drive action by setting up completion and target dates. You build out those project outlines that could be built in Gantt charts, but it's like a Gantt chart. You got to have the task. We're going to design a new logo. You got to have the time frame. Okay, it's going to take us 15 hours. How long will it take? It'll probably take us 2 months because we've got owners to talk to. We might even do a few small tests with potential customers. If you're in business, you might really do. And changing a logo is a really big deal. We've been working on with the dairy right now to modify, not change, modify the logo. And we've worked on it for 6 weeks. Okay, it doesn't go fast. The reason is that you have to really take a look at all of these things. Will it work on a website? Are you going to put it on a black background? Are you going to use it on t-shirts? You have to look at all of these aspects. And a lot of small business people don't even begin to think about how many ways it's going to be used, what it means to particular customers if they glance at it, etc. And then finally, you got to assign it to somebody so that you can get this done. Project management is the biggest weakness of every single marketing department in America. You heard it here first, folks. So this is a big deal. This is why marketing can work, is because it has to be properly managed. So when you're really doing this execution, this is like, okay, what would it look like? And this is really basic. But under the creative development phase, you say, okay, what's the look and feel going to be? What's the tone of our logo going to be? Again, you've already looked at your target base, and your positioning statement and your emplacement, and so you think that through intellectually before you hire the designer. Then you say, okay, it's time to do the design work. The designer needs input, because designers, if you just give them a flat slate of paper, which is usually what happens, good ones can do a pretty good job for not very much money. They can just and nowadays, if you just want a really simple logo just to kind of get by, you can get one of those offline just in an hour. So there are logos all over the place. The question is going to be can you live with it for a long time? So with the dairy, why does it take 6 weeks? Because we have 35,000 customers who know that they have an attitude about the image of that business. The last thing we want to do is screw that up, right? And so that's the reason it takes time and effort. Yet we know we need to update it because we know that our demographics are changing. The older ones are getting a little older and they're not, they know the logo and we don't want to lose them. But the younger ones are kind of going, is this a progressive company that's keeping up with the times? We don't want to feel old and stodgy. A lot of businesses make that mistake too. So now we have to do something in between, something that is going to attempt to look fresh and at the same time not completely alienate everybody else. And therefore, it takes a lot of time and effort. A lot of people are looking at it. We have to try it on the web, on a mock-up website, and do quite a bit of work on that. So that's the first thing. And then you do the design work. It takes the time it takes, and then you think you're done. No, you're not done. What are you going to say about your company? This is the copy work. And so you've written a positioning statement, and that statement drives the copy. And then you can begin to put in, you can start off with bullet points, but at some point you need to write some articles, do some testing, go back, reread, rethink. What is it that we're going to put on a brochure? How detailed should that be? That needs to be at least kind of felt through, and maybe some actual work done on that before you actually start doing any layout on anything. And then finally you can get ready to start working on the website concepts. Okay, now you've got your design work pretty well done. You know where you're going to go, but you still need a budget for all your media. You select your media. You got to have a budget, especially for media, because at first, if you're just getting started, if you haven't measured your media response rates, then you don't know what to do or how much to budget. So you try to split it out the way that you think it's going to be. It's going to be a mistake. You're going to get it fixed though, because you're going to monitor it. So you want to get media estimates first of all. You want to do your media selection. Then you have to have, the design has to be appropriate for each. So Edgar's got 3 or 4 formats that he does for restaurants, and those restaurants, those have to be each reformatted because they have different design sizes. And because they're videos, that's a little bit more complicated than just moving stuff around on a page and changing the width and height. Of course, the website needs to be actually, you have to finish designing that. So you need to have the copy for that too. So you know about how much is going to be there, how it's going to flow. You need social media design. And by that, I'm not talking just about the design work, because you have the design elements done. I'm really talking about what is social media going to do for you? And how is it going to interface with the content that you're going to be developing in your program? Will that push people to the website to do the close? Will you try and close in social media? Or will you drive them to a telephone? I mean, you've got the whole process, the customer the customer journey, which we'll talk about next time. The customer journey needs to be understood, because each one of these media is going to be touching that customer through the entire process. Some companies have a process that might take 3 years in order to be able to get a close. And you start them off with a little bit different media, and as you get closer and closer, they need a different level of attention. So you're talking about printed materials, radio and podcast, potentially, of course, printed media. That, I mean, newspapers, magazines, these are not, even though it's easy to say they're dead, there are lots and lots of good places to utilize a newspaper, particularly with some of the prices that are really much more affordable now. And there are all kinds of those these days. So that's still viable if you're careful about how you buy it. Direct mail, again, still extremely viable. It's costly compared to social media, but people will almost always pick up and look at every single piece of mail in their box on its way to the trash. So that is more than you're going to get on social media if they are not interested in or they're not following you. And for some people, TV. And then PR is a big deal for people with low budgets and, of course, events. So that's sort of the media selection. Before we just leave this and kind of open it up for discussion, I do want to acknowledge that you have two different kinds of businesses, and it works a little differently. And you've got, those are consumer businesses, B2C, business to consumer, and business to business. And so there's just a little bit of difference. And the difference here is that if in fact you're a maker, you make something, you may have to deal with a wholesaler, which means that you may have two different groups to market to. You have the wholesalers to market to, you may want to market to retailers, and you may want to market directly to the consumer. So those are different audiences, but the same exact company. Whereas sometimes business to business, you can just go directly to your customer, and you can do that through the internet, and the customer is a business customer. So I want to acknowledge that I haven't forgotten that there are some differences there. Okay, and I think that's pretty much it, jumping into customer analysis and so forth. But that's some quick information, but it has a lot to do with how do we get this thing going, how do we start. So let's open up to the panel. Ed, be sure to unmute your microphone.
So, Ron, I've got a question. Well, actually, first of all, a statement, I guess. In the early days of internet presentations, most of the stuff we did in America was in English, and pretty attuned to the English language. And then over a period of time, it was very obviously there was another couple of audiences at least. There were some multicultural audiences, and some websites chose very elegantly to go and promote you could just switch at the click of a button. But also there were some that had a different website for a different language set, taking into account the fact that the way language is used needs to be rearranged. It just can't be flipped from English to Spanish or English to Chinese, whatever, because the actual way we state things is different.
Yeah.
So that went on for a while. But what about in terms of culture? Why couldn't we have, for example, a website that had the ability to be presented for the existing culture that we're with, but also start to some extent, not a mirror website, but a parallel website that's designed for a different demographic group? Has anybody experimented with that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There are a lot of people that do that. We just don't run into them very often because we're looking at the one that applies to us, or you're doing a search, search in Portuguese, and so you're getting Portuguese websites because you're using Portuguese words, and so you're not going to, we're not going to see that. But I think you're also talking a little bit about maybe different categories. It's not just language alone. It could be different categories of customers that you want to treat a little differently. That's not as well developed, and I think that big companies experiment with this a lot. I can't report back what their findings are. I think it's something that if your market is big enough and you have the budget for it, it's absolutely a consideration to consider language. I mean, serious cultural differences. And I think one way that you can just think about this is kind of to go back to the other example, and that is that if you're selling something, it could be, I don't know, a pair, I was going to say glass. Well, if you're selling stemware, or something that's fairly common that has a regular market, but something is unique about it. But it's possible that you could have two audiences. So you may have that 90-year-old woman as an audience, and the reason she would be buying it would be totally different than it would be if you got the hip hop urban guy in sneakers. Now, you might have the same customer, but you might have different purposes. And in a case like that, you certainly wouldn't have the same website. You know, you're not going to try and sell a fashion item to a hip hop person if the thing looks, old and dreary and stupid, to them. But the older person needs simplicity and just straightforward. This is what this does. This is why you might like it. So I absolutely believe in that, and I think that we haven't gone very far in that. Now, but I'd like to hear, Edgar. I'd like to hear your thoughts about that because I mean you're in the middle of that right now.
And so I was going to ask, would landing page be the kind of like a workaround from what John Mills was trying to work or describe? Because what we use websites for, we call it a backwards website now, where if we're trying to market a certain restaurant, when we do the campaign, we're focusing on landing on a page that it's only specific to whatever that campaign was. So if it's, for example, online ordering, that's all we want to do, online ordering. Who really does online ordering is typically the younger crowd, under 35 years of age, 45 years of age and under, for example. Could we figure that out using a platform that we're going to use for marketing, which should be Facebook? And then we built, it was like, okay, for this commercial, for this video, when they click on the link, it's going to be a website from the same website, but just land in a place that looks specifically only for that one, could be audience, could be thing that we're marketing, and not confuse them by landing them somewhere else. I don't know, that might be a good kind of like solution when it also comes to culture, if it also comes to language, and that might be kind of like similar to what we're doing. I don't know if that's
I think that's an exact parallel. You're taking it one step further, which is sort of the one-to-one marketing. The concept of one-to-one marketing came out of customer relationship management. I worked on the customer relationship management concepts in the 90s. And by the mid 90s, there were 2 or 3 books on that concept. But a guy by the name of Peppers and Rogers, I believe it was, wrote a book called One-to-One Marketing, which really blew the top off of the concept. And the concept there is you plan your marketing material and message for a specific customer. And you go, gee, okay, so we've got an ice cream store. Can we really do that? And the answer, might be, well, no. I mean, we can do all kinds of other advertising, but I don't even know who the customer is who's going to walk in the store yet. And so what do I do? How do I do that? So if you're selling chewing gum, you're not going to try to market directly to that customer in a customized way. You're going to do it in a general way. But if you've got bigger deals, like say a client relationship that is enough money to support it, really the ultimate way is one-to-one, which simply means everything is directly customized for the conversation you're going to have with that customer. And it continues to be customized throughout the entire sale and throughout the customer journey. So that's easy for somebody who's got $1 million account. You can have a salesperson on that, doing responsiveness all the time. But if you're selling $100 products, say to a business customer, you want to understand a lot more about that business customer and talk about their industry. You don't want to talk about another industry that they can't relate to. You want to talk about them. You want to even know things like the buyer's quirks if you can. And if you really want to do it well, you keep track of the kids' birthdays and you have dinner with them. And that's the relationship. The problem with the relationship concept, the theory of relationship management, is that if you have too many of them, you can't do it. So the question is, where is too many? And the answer is somewhere between, depending on the volume and work for each customer, it's somewhere between one or two or three and 50. So if you've got 35,000 customers, it's pretty difficult to do that, right? How will you do that? And I'll say at the dairy, we're not there. We're not doing customized messages based on cohort groups. However, we're able to get by that because the cohort groups we do have are so narrow that they appear very similar. They're only about 4 or 5% of the entire population. And so we look like we're marketing pretty closely to them and their needs. And we do things, we finished one of our triannual surveys last week. We watch to see how those demographics change. We've seen how we know how many people, adults over 55 are in those households. We know that. We know the percentage of those. And so the next step would be, well, we're now going to start assigning this knowledge to specific customers, and we're going to start sending bone strength and calcium nutrition to those people, and not to the middle-aged people who don't care about that. So I mean, you can go there. Now we're dealing with budgets and effectiveness. But yeah, absolutely. I think that's where we're going, John. I'll say that applications like HubSpot are set up to do that. That's what they're trying to do. It takes a very mature customer to do it. But if you have the right kind of business, you can do autoresponders on email. And so if you get a prospect in and they ask a certain question, you can automatically respond with a response to that email and address that particular question in an automatic fashion. And then if the natural sequence is for them to say, yeah, I'd like to buy it, then you follow up with, a sales order, or gee, I'm going to hold off till later, or no, I don't want it. And if you're going to hold off to later, it's going to automatically reset it to go in the cycle for 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 10 weeks, something like that, and recommunicate with them. And if they say no, absolutely not, then you're going to put them in the once a year category. So you see, I mean, literally the software is going there. And so when you do that, like Edgar mentioned, you are setting up individual landing pages for those customers when they're asking for that information. So it absolutely happens. Any other questions, comments just about the whole idea of marketing and the structure of marketing planning?
No, it's very refreshing to see this kind of stuff. It's kind of scary when it comes down to am I doing it right? Am I doing some steps? Which step did I skip? Can I be more proactive? And so what I think the fact that it's restaurants and it's food, I don't have to struggle as much when it comes to identifying the audiences. But I think I can learn from something like this to maybe identify things like, for example, the conversation we had about the word Michoacana, what that really means to most people that hear that word.
Right.
We start doing some marketing to educational marketing about what Michoacana means for those that never been to one, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a perfect example. It sort of answers John's question in a very specific way, and that is that when you literally have a sort of side-by-side culture, or culture next to a culture, and it turns out that there's, it's a big enough market so that there are businesses that are being created in this market that are being created specifically for them, simply because they don't know what else to do. I don't know how to market to another group, or this is what I know how to do. I know how to cook food from a specific location in Mexico, and so that's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to specialize in that. They don't know if it's going to work. They just hope it works. They automatically adjust their menu based on what people are buying, the people who fall in the restaurant at first. but eventually they see the patterns and they make those adjustments automatically. So when you're talking, when you're doing your advertising and you want to specifically get to those customers, it doesn't mean that they are the only ones who know it, but they're the ones who would say, okay, this supports authenticity of this particular restaurant. They're using these words that helps me know that they're authentic. So absolutely, I think that's the direction that you go. And in the sense that you can break these into pieces, your marketing will end up being more effective because it'll resonate with them. They'll hear what you have to say. Yeah. So that's a good, really very good example of that whole thing. But I think that you're also kind of thinking, I'm sure, wow, this is really structured, and how can I structure this for my clients? And I think the answer is mostly by just taking that methodology, that process, and building the process in the service that you provide. And that's exactly how we did it for clients too. I mean, we built Gantt charts for every project. We would have 30 or 40 projects in the company going at any given time, any campaigns. The only way that we could make sure that we were getting them all done in the right sequence among, the designers, the webmasters, the content writers, the voiceovers, and all of the various things we had to contract out or we had employees do. We had to use a pretty intense project management system in order to be able to coordinate all of that. And you can do that with small enough projects. You can do a pretty good job just in Excel and build Gantt charts. It requires an awful lot of review by somebody who loves detail. So, I mean, that's the issue. And there are a lot of owners that just don't see the value in spending the time to go through and make sure that the details are right. And so they don't do it, and they end up with an event and they've got no napkins. Or they end up with, in a more promotional way, they're building a campaign and you have a bunch of people respond and it was to redeem a coupon, but we forgot to put the coupon in the mailer. So I mean, that's the kind of tragedy that happens if you don't have that attention to detail. Everything has to work. The other thing that I'll just say is that plans for marketing should be built to accomplish a campaign, should be built to deal with a specific campaign with a very specific objective. That's all. And then you measure the outcome of that particular objective. And so if it's to increase a certain product by 20%, then you want to have a campaign that's built to do that kind of thing. If it doesn't happen and you don't get it increased by 20%, you know that campaign is failed. Now, this is really hard to do in companies because people are not that disciplined, and very, very seldom do marketers, are they dogged about it. I'm just saying that I found that the more dogged that they were, the more persistent they were at following through and making sure that all of it gets done, is the more they end up becoming more successful because they planned it, they did it, they measured it, and it just keeps getting better all the time. It's the ones that turn their campaigns on and turn them off, and turn them on and turn them off, that end up causing a problem. And then the marketing people get a bad name because typically they don't work. In my experience, they don't work because they haven't followed the process. So, okay. Any other comments or questions about what we've discussed before we sign off today?
Well, I got a few things, Ron.
Yeah, good.
It said, and it sounds so easy to do, but we all know that it isn't.
No, it's not easy.
And the question is, who do you get to help you do this kind of work? A lot of people are hounding you day in and day out, try to give you lists of potential customers, but who can you really trust to help you maneuver and pivot in the right area and move forward with a successful plan. Because most businesses I know, they can't afford to have their own marketing department, but they can afford to provide contract services from somebody who's got that expertise.
Yeah.
Who do they call?
That's an answer that I can't really, a question I can't really answer, as I think you already knew. And the problem here is that the marketing industry is fragmented. The word marketing is more akin to the word management or leadership. It's like, well, we know what management is supposed to manage. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of information on managing, so we got that down. But leadership, it's like, well, who do you call? Who really does it? What are the definitions of leadership on, in some cases? So when you're talking about marketing, it goes from everything that we've talked about, from real creative to very diligent and attention to detail. You can't find that in a single person very often. That's really, really hard. Therefore, you have to have more than one person. So then you say, well, why can't I hire a marketing company that does that? And I'll say that yes, we did do that pretty effectively, I would say. However, most of them don't. Occasionally you find really good marketing people that do a lot of this stuff very orderly and very well, most of it in their head, but they get it all done. I mean, they do it in a process. And I've known a few of those people in my life. But for the most part, when you take a look at somebody who's, quote, a marketing person, they come from the design side, the creative side in general, maybe they're writers, and they're not the kind of people that do checklists very well. And so just as in accounting, I mean, if you want somebody who's really good in accounting, you want somebody who's got an incredible attention to detail. They check all of the boxes, they do things in the right process, they get the whole thing done, and voila, you get your financial statements out within, 5 days of the end of the month. Well, those kind of people have to be joined with the creatives, et cetera, and they have to work together in order to be able to marry this. And I find that, I agree, it's very hard to do this with these different kinds of people that are required in order to really do good planning. The best ones, the marketing managers that I've known at the VP of marketing level, have come out of, say, business school, that maybe they might majored in marketing, but they were really sort of predisposed to be highly organized, very academic in nature. And so as managers, if they have a big enough marketing budget, they then will go out and find the creative, find the writers, find the people, and not knowing very much about any of those things, but able to manage the process. And so, now if those people also are able to present pretty well in front of an audience and maybe even talk to customers from time to time just to get feedback, then you've got some individual person who, once they learn the mechanics, can do a pretty good job. But you find a young person who hasn't done this for 10 or 20 years, they don't know what the print process is about. They have to rely on other people. They don't understand the design process. They don't understand all the little nuances of all these different manufacturing processes in a way. And as a result, you just don't get it done. And so, but they get it done, but the young ones really, they are focused on their own area and they get that done. But they, so that's the problem. And I agree with you. It's very hard. So I think in terms of what an owner does is an owner takes, and the reason I developed this is an owner takes this plan and with the people they have simply drives it forward around the cycle, and they have to drive it forward. How did we do? What's done? What information did we get? And let's go to the next piece. Okay, now we're in the design phase. Let's do that. Let's do this. So if they just keep it, now it's hard to get a creative person in that mindset. But if they can just get themselves into that mindset that I have to do it step by step by step, then you can have an outcome that is going to be better. Toyota has the, some companies say, you got to get all the best people on the bus, right? But Toyota has an attitude of we don't want to hire all the best people. That costs us too much money. What we want is we want the best process. And that process can be handled by an average person. Give us average people and the best processes. We will build a superior car. And that worked. That worked pretty well. That's kind of what this is modeled after is here's the process. You can have average people do this stuff and it's going to come out well enough, not the best necessarily. It's not going to be the very, very, very best. It's not going to compete with the big advertising agencies in terms of creative, but you're going to get it done so that the company can move forward and hit their and begin to grow.
So if I could add something real quick to that, I think the only reason why I'm pulling off this, because I'm a creative, I'm not an organized individual. You can probably tell by the back of my desk, and every time I clean up and I just looked and it gets messy again.
Yeah.
It's because I have tried to focus on building not the best commercial, but the best commercial that works.
Mm-hmm.
With some sort of process that's repetitive and strict that I don't deviate from. So because otherwise I would not be able to keep myself organized. When did I figure that out, that I'm not an organized person? Maybe after the personality test or those things.
Yeah.
Or my life already known. So how to fight that is I utilized Mexico to try to find somebody that's the complete opposite of me. And recently I've realized that's what I needed, somebody that does not like chaos and looks at my chaos and it needs to figure out a way how to clean it up. My folders, where I save my art, my desktop, everything. He's just trying to help me out as much as I can to organize my life. So ever since he came around, I feel like, okay, there's a potential to organize all this. So it's the experience that I've been feeling is, if it wasn't for the awareness that, that you're not good at certain things, if it wasn't for the knowing that I need to find someone else, otherwise I won't be able to grow. And then also knowing that you have to have this process, otherwise you're going to be stuck and not finish, or at least only have the best looking video that never catches anybody's attention. And so,
yeah, right. Right. And I think it's sort of the 80-20 rule too can apply here. And that is that you're going to have 80% of the effectiveness with, say, 20% of the design work. And so you don't have to it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be the 1989 Nike or Apple commercial, which was stunning in every single way and did happen to work. But they could afford that, but it doesn't have to be that in order to be able to be very, very effective. Many companies have managed to do the right things and grow their business because for most of the time they looked fine given their audience. Remember, let's remember, it doesn't have to be perfect in everybody's eyes. It only has to be pretty darn good in the eyes of your target customers. See, that really helps a lot if you keep that in perspective.
And Ron, can you share your wheel again? The last one you put up in particular, that has a lot of detail, much more detail than the one that I've seen in the past.
That
one there.
This one, yeah. This one does have more detail.
What I like about it is that if you're focusing on it, it's an ongoing job, and you're going around the wheel and you're making sure that everything you're doing is coordinated.
Whoops, sorry about that.
And connected in some manner to what you're trying to do. So to me, that makes some sense. And I'm also interested to see what Edgar does with his new venture. in promoting that, utilizing this circle
Hmm.
marketing process. Because I bet he's already got a lot of ideas in mind. And the thing about Edgar that really amazes me is the quality of the pictures and video that he uses in his ads. They're uncompromised by any normal ill thinking that could be out there. They're really, really targeted. They're easy to read. They're high quality, and it really gets back to what he's trying to sell. I really like your photos, Edgar, as you can tell.
Eddie, thank you. And one of the things that, I mean, I'm going to be doing a lot of these journeys on how to create a process on it. A lot of it has to do with what Ron has taught me, but I know I want to help you out, Eddie, with what we talked about before. I just here's
I'll throw that to the side. I'm more interested in taking this idea that you're investing in now and building a business out of it.
And I think one of the things that I feel that the Red Local is working, it's not that I have a lot of experience with what Ron taught me. I realize I cannot go out and choose an industry that's requires this wheel to be implemented in every single one in a different niche. I was never going to figure that out, at least not before I had gray hair, right? It's going to take me a while. So that's why I chose the restaurant industry, because based on what Ron was saying, is like, wait a minute, if we focus on restaurants, the market, most of this stuff is pretty obvious. It's who the audience might be, the at least 5 mile radius from where the location is, then I can just, study the location. So it feels like it's working mostly because it allows us to do a lot of these steps, I think. And I don't know if Ron can agree with me or not, without necessarily going out and doing hard research that it's not already available in the internet, like the Google traffic. I use Google traffic maps to find out how slow a location might be.
Yeah.
I use what do you call it? Target areas like Albertsons, Steady Brothers, Cardenas Mexican markets, and compare their traffic, see if they're only a mile away. And if they're only a mile away, then there's my audience.
Yeah.
There are more Mexican markets than there is American markets. I'm just going to focus on that commercial in that area, and everything's available. Well, most of this process is available for free without really having to pay for it.
Well, yeah, and of course, remember, it wasn't very long ago that just kind of doing a traffic study would be a $15,000 or $20,000 deal. So, what you've done is you've found some of these incredible, and we do have incredible tools available to us today, and you've just intuitively started pulling these things together and utilize them. So, I mean, you are doing a lot of these things. So, and I'm very pleased to, that you are doing those things. I would only suggest that part of the cycle is not how you get started, because that's really kind of easy in a sense for clients, because there's so much low-hanging fruit. But it's when you come back around and you've kind of executed a bunch of stuff and sales are not working. What happens when inflation is at 8%, but business only went up 3%, and your client is going, I'm 5% behind. I'm going to have to cut you back here a little bit. Well, it's as you go back around and you utilize the feedback systems that you have to build sort of at the end of this thing in order to be able to make that next evaluation. When you come to the point to where you go, gee, this has been very successful. We've done really well, but we're already number one in our very teeny niche market. We're already number one, and we've got about 50% of that business, and our competitors share the rest. And but how are we going to grow? Because that market's not going to grow anymore. And now you need to know, how do you extend that market just a little bit? How does it come up just a little bit? And well, you better know where to go for that next piece. With the dairy, we've got 8 of the cohorts well mapped. We know exactly where those 8 people are, and we know that out of 35,000 customers, we have 350,000 more we can get. But if we ever need to move into some of the other cohorts, of which are sort of secondary now, but they could be important to us. We know there are 500,000 of those, and we know where they live. Okay. So the question that I would ask you is, when your clients say to you, how am I going to expand to the next level? You better have an answer by the time you get there. So that's why this system works. Because every time you go around the cycle, you learn more about your customers, more about your competitors, more. Every time it gets more and more sophisticated. So we've done this cycle, 7 or 8 times at the dairy now over all the years. And we have probably in the range of, we have one major survey, just to give you an idea, we sent out 15,000 surveys, and we have 3,000 people who have answered the survey. Now, that probability, that error is going to be, plus or minus 0.5%. We got this nailed, but we also do another 10 or 15 surveys a year to smaller audiences on taste for new products, on our service, whatever feels like we need to have more, and on a relatively regular basis, we get feedback from these people. And so, we didn't start there. It took us 5-10 years to get to that point, to where we realized we've got to know more and more and more in order to be able to keep this, what is now a monster, going. Feeding the monster gets harder as it gets bigger. So that's the other side to this process that I found to be successful. It works for little companies, a little less formal, but for big companies, you keep it formal, you keep it going. It solves the problems before you get there. So, okay, great. Well, thank you. Any other last words? Oh, this has been a great panel. Thanks for your input, everybody. And we'll look forward to seeing everybody again next, or in 2 weeks.